And bring in Congressman Marsha Blackburn right now. Congressman, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Sure.
I know that you agree with Speaker Ryan. You've talked about this before on this program, but I've got to ask you to talk to us about a path to see this happening, Congressman, because I don't know. I've been asking this question today and yesterday. Is it time to ask the question if the GOP is really wanting this president to succeed? I mean, here we are 6 months in, Congressman. How do you get to tax reform?
And the way you get to tax reform is for us to say, yes, this president deserves to succeed because the American people deserve to succeed. And what we want to do is see productivity. There are a lot of innovative companies out here that have been waiting on tax reform, waiting on health care reform for a couple of reasons. They want to add employees and they want to grow their businesses. They're looking for export markets and they want some certainty, some stability. And Maria, one of the things I think is so important, and the reason we have to look at the business side of this tax code is with technology and utilization of technology. If you're going to do upgrades or reposition or change manufacturing processes, and that involves technology, you want to be able to write that off sooner rather than later. It's not going to be 15 years, it's going to be closer to 2 years that you want to have that write down. So getting in there, looking at the environment as it is and saying, how do we make this competitive so that these new companies, new starts, have the opportunity to grow to be global entities. We have to get this done.
Yeah, well, look, you're speaking to the choir here, Congressman. We understand all the reasons why you've got to get tax reform done. We got it. We understand the economy and what business needs right now.
Yes, you do.
But how are you going to get there? I mean, the fact is you had all of these debates on health care. Aren't you going to have the same debates on tax reform when it comes to what the corporate rate should be, what the deductions are that should stay and what should go, border adjustment tax? And also, who's holding back progress, Congressman? It's time to start calling those people out. Who's standing in the way of the president's agenda? American voters want this to be executed.
You're exactly right, and I think that individuals need to be holding their senators and representatives accountable to taking action. They want to see things done. They want the Get Her Done caucus to rule the day and for people to come together. And I tell you what, I have heard from so many people. Yesterday at a farmer's market here in my district, people were saying, why can't Democrats and Republicans work together? I went to a meeting with innovators, technology innovators last evening, and they were asking the same question. And I think the best way to do that is for the voters to weigh in, individuals to weigh in and say, we expect you to get to the table to negotiate this.
They did that. They elected, the Republicans have a majority in the House and a majority in the Senate, and y'all aren't doing anything. Now, to your credit, the Republicans in the House did at least move a health care reform bill.
Yes, they did.
You did at least move that somehow the Republicans in the House, with all their disparate ideas, did something that the senators couldn't. But with regard to tax reform, what is the biggest stumbling block? Is the border adjustment tax off the table? Can we get past that and say we're not going to use that? Is that off the table? What is the biggest stumbling block?
Dagan, I do think the border adjustment tax is off the table. The reason for that is you have to say, what is the value added there? And nobody can seem to give a definitive answer on a value added. When it comes to tax, timing is part of the process, making certain that a budget is there so tax can go through on reconciliation. I agree with what many have said. Let's look at the way this was approached when Reagan did his tax reform and did it on a bipartisan basis. That is going to be important. The Democrats many times are not wanting to work on anything. Now, as far as productivity in the House, yes, we've passed over 300 bills out of the House, and we want the Senate to catch up with us. I think they've done about 120 bills, and it's important for them to begin to take action. Some of these rules, regulations, bills we're passing that deal with efficiencies that are embedded in the economy, rolling back regulations, those things need to get across the finish line. And I will say, On some of those smaller measures, yes, we have seen bipartisan support. On the big measures, healthcare tax reform, so far we're not seeing that bipartisan support. And this is where constituents need to be weighing in with their elected representatives.
You're already running for next year, Congressman. That's what the way that it sounds, is that you're asking voters to go out there and vote the Democrats out next year, when in fact, if the Republicans don't get something done, all of your jobs are on the line.
I agree with you on that. But constituents weighing in with those congressional offices and saying, I would like to see something get done. Those offices pay attention to that. And if members are hearing from their constituents that they want them to come to the table and work for the good of the country, that has a bearing. And at this point, when you have some who are saying we're not going to come to the table, I think hearing from their constituents that there is an expectation that for the good of the country, you're going to get this done. Look at what just lowering the marginal rates would do. If people could go back and reset their withholding, what is coming out of their paychecks, increase that take-home pay, just being able to do that, because all of our tax reform will be retroactive to January 1 of 2017.
Yeah, but you know what? You're talking about cutting taxes on individual rates, which is, of course, what everybody wants you to do. But then you've got some people in the caucus that say, well, if you're going to cut taxes that much, we need revenue somewhere, right? I mean, Speaker Ryan did not mention that border adjustment tax at all yesterday, even though, of course, we know he championed it in the past. But Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan had real opinions about this yesterday. He joined us yesterday, Congressman. I want you to hear what he had to say about this whole fight on taxes. It doesn't sound like it's going to be easy. Here's Jim Jordan.
This idea that it's going to be revenue neutral, we're opposed to that. Many of us conservatives, we think that's just a fancy way of saying that the tax burden stays the same. We're all for tax reform and lowering the tax burden on families and creating a tax code that's conducive to economic growth. But we don't want this border adjustment tax, which is a whole new tax put on the American economy. We don't want that in the plan. So show us the plan, then we'll pass the budget if we're actually achieving the savings we need to and putting together the right kind of tax plan.
Not on the same page, huh, Congressman?
Well, I think that what you're doing is working out some of those finishing details. Revenue neutral. People want tax reform to be a net positive, not only to their personal economy, but to the nation's economy. And as Mick Mulvaney said yesterday, sometimes you're going to see that the deficit will tick up, or the CBO's estimates on the deficit are going to tick up, because you're going to lead to growth in revenue and economic growth. It'd be great to have a GDP growth at 3.5%. And then that is going to give you more revenues. And, you know, CBO gets these numbers wrong a lot of times, and you all know how they do. They don't utilize the dynamic scoring, and they don't take into consideration that a change in policy is going to lead to a change in action, which leads to a change in revenue.
Right. Congressman, my fear is that this reform can be revenue neutral, but that could not happen. And tax could end up just like the health care bill did, reforming social welfare programs or eliminating the vast deductions. Every year we have $1.5 trillion of deductions. But these are politically very difficult. So we have the most backward tax system in the developed world. There's massive incentives to take profits offshore, keep them there, inversions, et cetera.
Well, they want that $5 trillion back.
We want the $5 trillion back, and there's such a clear incentive to small businesses that are the ones that pay the tax.
Well, she knows that.
That's right.
So my question then, Congressman, is if you can't get it through reconciliation, is there any chance that Mitch McConnell will consider basically nuking the nuke, which means that you don't get it through reconciliation, but you ram it through just kind of on the similar lines that we did with the Supreme Court?
You want to see that?
You know, I got to tell you, I would love to see the nuclear option used for health care and for tax reform so that we can move on to things like infrastructure, broadband expansion, some of the items that the American people want to see done. And I think that it may be time to declare the nuclear option and say, let's get the wheels turning. Let's get the economy back on track.
Congresswoman, Steve Bannon has suggested raising the tax rate up to perhaps 40% for the top personal income tax bracket. Would you support a tax reform package that kept the top personal rate stable or increased it?
I would rather see that rate come down because you're going to see more growth and innovation, and if you do that, we all know that the formula, less regulation, less litigation, less taxation, leads to more innovation and job creation. And if you have some of those top income earners and they are looking for the opportunity to do innovation and new starts, that is jobs growth. And that is where people are going to be able to increase their wages because there's more competition for that labor. And you all know that cycle very well. So the lower the rates on those marginal rates, the better it is. I do think doing the marginal rates sooner rather than later has the benefit of allowing families to go in there and reset that withholding and to take home more of that paycheck, which means they're going to be spending that for kids, for schools, for activities, for meals out, for consumer goods. And that has an impact. Those consumer economics count.
So is that going to get any traction? The Bannon comment about the highest rates staying all the way up there to 40%, is that going to gain any traction, do you think? I know you're not for it, but what about your colleagues?
I'm not sure you're going to see a lot of people for that. That may have the popularity of the bat tax.
Okay, all right. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks so much.
Good to see you.
I think that was your best joke ever, Congressman Marsha Blackburn. Good to see you. Have a great day. We'll be right back. Stay with us.